The world outside the window is a slow-motion blur of sepia and gold, a long, horizontal stretch of July heat that seems to vibrate just above the asphalt, and you are sitting here, perfectly still, enveloped in the massive, overbuilt quiet of the 1973 Buick LeSabre. It begins with the door, a heavy, sculpted slab of American steel that requires a deliberate, weighted pull of the chrome handle. The metal is hot from the sun, a dry, searing heat that leaves a faint scent of minerals on your palm. And as it swings open, it carries a sense of immense, structural dignity. Its hinges let out a singular, well-oiled click before you slide onto the bench seat. The upholstery is a thick, expanded vinyl, top-stitched in wide architectural ribs that press firmly against your lower back, and there is that unmistakable interior aroma, a heady, comforting cocktail of sun-warmed plastic, old maps tucked into the door pockets, and a faint, lingering ghost of peppermint gum. You reach out to close the door, and the sound it makes is a deep, muffled thrum, a vacuum-sealed ceiling of the world that cuts the cicadas, rhythmic buzzing down to a distant, microscopic hum, leaving you alone in this pressurized cabin of soft light and shadow. The steering wheel is a thin, hard-rimmed circle of black resin, cool to the touch despite the afternoon glare, and as your fingers wrap around it, you feel the subtle texture of the faux leather grain, a series of tiny, molded ridges that provide a grounding, tactile certainty. You don't start the engine yet. Instead, you just sit, watching the dust motes dance in a single, concentrated shaft of light that has pierced through the tinted windshield to illuminate the dashboard's vast, padded expanse. The dash is a landscape of soft-touch materials and imitation wood grain that looks deep enough to dive into, housing a horizontal speedometer that waits at zero, its long orange needle resting like a quiet promise. Beneath it, the AM radio dial is a glowing amber rectangle, and you reach out, your fingertip grazing the knurled plastic of the volume knob, feeling the mechanical resistance, the heavy analog click as you turn it to the right. The speakers, hidden somewhere deep within the dash and the rear parcel shelf, wake up with a soft, velvet-textured hiss, a comforting floor of white noise that precedes the music, and then, emerging from the static like a ship through fog, comes the sound of a distant station. It's a soft rock ballad, something with a Fender Rhodes piano that ripples like water, the notes rounded and warm, stripped of all high-end sharpness by the Buick's heavy insulation and the natural limitations of the airwaves. You lean back, the vinyl seat sighing beneath your weight as it adjusts to your frame, and you watch a single grasshopper land on the long, vast hood of the car. The paint is a color they called harvest gold, a muted, that earthy yellow that seems to drink in the sunlight rather than reflect it. The hood stretches out before you like the deck of a ship, tapering toward the chrome ornament at the very tip, a small, elegant marker that helps you navigate the sheer scale of this machine. You find the ignition switch, located on the steering column, and as you insert the heavy, square-headed GM key, the metal feels solid and cold, a stark contrast to the humid air lingering outside the glass. The turn is fluid and mechanical, a series of internal tumblers falling into place with a crisp, metallic snick, and then the starter motor engages, a high-pitched, rhythmic whir, 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 before the V8 engine catches with a low, guttural growl that quickly settles into a rhythmic, sewing machine idle. You don't feel the vibration so much as you hear it, a subterranean bass note that resonates through the floorboards and into the soles of your shoes, a steady, dependable heartbeat that says the world is okay, the road is open, and there is nowhere else you need to be. The air conditioning unit, a heavy chrome lever labeled Max Cold, is slid to the left, and after a moment of mechanical clicking behind the dash, a column of chilled air begins to spill from the circular vents. It smells of frost and old metal, a crisp, dry sensation that hits your face and begins to push back the heavy, humid weight of the July afternoon, creating a private microclimate of cool, filtered stillness. You shift the long, column-mounted gear selector down into drive, a heavy hydraulic movement that makes the front of the car dip slightly, a polite bow as the transmission engages, and you release the parking brake with a satisfying loud clack of the foot pedal releasing. The car begins to creep forward without you even touching the gas, a slow, predatory roll over the gravel of the driveway, and the sound of the stones crunching beneath the massive white-wall tires is a series of sharp, rhythmic pops like slow-motion popcorn. You turn the wheel, and the power steering is so over-assisted, so light, that you can guide this 2-ton living room with a single finger, feeling the way the front end swings wide, the long hood leading the way out onto the blacktop. As the tires transition from gravel to asphalt, the noise vanishes instantly, replaced by a surreal, gliding silence, a sensation of floating just an inch above the world, as the heavy-duty coil springs and thick rubber bushings soak up every imperfection in the road. The blacktop stretches out before the Buick like a long, heat-softened ribbon of charcoal, and as you accelerate, there is no sudden surge of mechanical violence, only a steady, gravitational pull as the V8 engine exhales a muted, resonant drone through the dual exhaust. You are moving at a languid 35 miles per hour, the perfect speed for the suspension to find its rhythm, a slow, oceanic pitching that makes the long hood rise and fall against the horizon of the cornfields. The corn is high now, a vibrant, dusty green that smells of chlorophyll and sun-baked earth, and as the wind from the car's movement rushes past the cracked open vent window, it brings a rhythmic thwack, thwack, thwack sound, the air buffeting against the heavy glass in a steady, hypnotic pulse. You reach out and adjust the chrome knob of the vent window, feeling the tension in the worm gear mechanism as it tilts the triangular pane just an inch further, directing a thin, concentrated stream of rural air across your knuckles. To your right, the fields are an endless, flickering strobe of gold and green, the stalks standing in perfect militaristic rows that blur into a singular vibrating texture as you glide past. Every few miles, the green is broken by the silver flash of a galvanized stock tank or the weathered, peeling red of a tobacco barn, its timber frame sagging with the weight of a century's worth of humidity. The light is changing now, shifting from the harsh, vertical glare of midday to the long, syrupy slant of the late afternoon, the golden hour, where every fence post casts a shadow that stretches halfway across the road, and the dust kicked up by a distant tractor hangs in the air like powdered bronze. You can feel the heat radiating off the fields, a heavy, invisible wall of warmth that tries to press into the car, but it is defeated by the Buick's thick, tinted glass and the steady, icy breath of the air conditioner humming behind the dashboard. The AM radio begins to crackle as you pass beneath a set of high-tension power lines, the speakers emitting a series of rhythmic, electric pops that sound like wood snapping in a fireplace, a brief intrusion of the modern world into your private analog sanctuary. You reach for the tuning knob, that heavy, weighted dial that moves with a buttery smoothness, and you slowly scan the frequencies, feeling the physical resistance of the internal string and pulley system. The needle slides past a frantic preacher and a burst of high-speed country fiddle before settling on a signal that feels thick and stable. A deep-voiced announcer with a throat like gravel and honey, introducing a slow, crooning ballad about a long-distance hum. The music is compressed, warm, and mid-range heavy, devoid of any digital artifice, sounding less like a recording and more like a physical presence sitting right there in the passenger seat beside you. Up ahead, a small independent gas station appears like a mirage in the heat waves, a whitewashed cinder-block building with a flat roof and a single, rusted Pepsi sign vibrating in the breeze. You slow down, the Buick's massive front drum brakes catching with a smooth, progressive bite that makes the nose of the car dip in a slow, dignified nod, and you turn off the blacktop onto the gravel apron of the station. The sound of the tires on the loose stones is a loud, crunching roar that echoes off the side of the building, a texture you can feel through the steering wheel as the vibrating pebbles telegraph the ground's unevenness directly to your palms. You pull up alongside the pumps, tall rounded sentinels of red-painted steel with glass faces that house the mechanical rolling digits. As you shift into park, the engine settles back into its rhythmic sewing machine tick, and the silence of the countryside rushes back in to fill the void, broken only by the ping-ping-ping of the cooling metal under the hood. You step out of the car, and the heat hits you like a physical weight, smelling of sun-baked gravel, spilled gasoline, and the dry, sweet scent of hay from the field across the way. The pump handle is heavy, made of solid, unyielding metal that has been polished smooth by decades of hands, and as you lift the lever to begin the flow, you hear the internal motor of the pump wake up with a low electric hum. Then the sound you've been waiting for. The rhythmic, mechanical clack-clack-clack of the analog wheels spinning behind the glass, tracking the gallons in a steady, unhurried count. It is a slow, tactile process, a far cry from the silent, digital flashes of the future. Here you can hear the fuel moving, feel the vibration in the hose, and watch the numbers tumble over one another in a physical display of commerce. You stand there for a moment, leaning one hand against the Buick's warm, golden C-pillar, watching a dragonfly hover over the chrome gas cap. The world feels suspended in amber, a moment where time has lost its forward momentum and simply decided to pool here in this quiet, dusty corner of 1974. There is no urgency, no ticking clock, only the smell of the air, the weight of the metal, and the long, golden road waiting to take you back into the heart of the afternoon. The gas pump finishes its work with a final metallic ting, and you hang the heavy nozzle back into its cradle, the spring-loaded lever snapping shut with a definitive industrial sound. Before getting back into the car, you walk toward the station's small storefront, your leather soles crunching rhythmically on the sun-bleached gravel, a sound that feels magnified in the heavy afternoon silence. The entrance is guarded by a wooden screen door, its white paint worn down to the grey grain around the handle, and as you pull it open, the coil spring stretches with a long musical whine, a high-pitched, metallic protest that ends in a soft, percussive slap as the door settles back against the frame. Inside, the air is 20 degrees cooler, smelling of floor wax, cedar shavings, and the sharp ozone tang of a humming refrigerated case. The linoleum underfoot is a checkered pattern of cream and seafoam green, worn thin in a path leading straight to the back, where a massive red and white cooler sits vibrating against the wall. You reach into the icy water of the chest. It's a deep, galvanized tub filled with slushy, half-melted ice, and your fingers go numb instantly as you root around for a glass bottle. When you find it, the glass is thick and pebbled, cold enough to make your skin ache, and as you pull it free, the water cascades off the rounded shoulders of the bottle in a series of bright, splashing drips that hit the floor with a clean, rhythmic sound. You take the bottle to the counter, a slab of dark, polished wood where an old mechanical cash register sits like a silver cathedral. The clerk, a man whose movements are as unhurried as the clouds outside, doesn't say a word. He simply nods, his eyes crinkling behind thick, wire-rimmed glasses. You use the bottle opener side-mounted to the counter, a heavy cast-iron notch, and the cap comes off with a sharp, pressurized hiss-clink, the metal disc bouncing once on the wood before falling still. The first sip is a shock of carbonation and cold, a crisp, syrupy sweetness that cuts through the dusty heat of the road, and you stand there for a moment, leaning against the cool glass of the storefront window, watching the Buick sit out in the sun. From this vantage point, the Le Sabre looks like a sculpture of harvest gold and chrome, its long, low profile hugging the gravel, the light catching the Buick script on the rear quarter panel in a way that makes the letters glow. You finish the drink slowly, the condensation on the glass blurring the world into a soft, impressionistic smear of colors. When you finally step back outside, the heat is a physical presence again, but it feels less intrusive now. Softened by the cold weight of the glass bottle, you return to the wooden crate by the door. You slide back into the Buick's driver's seat, and the familiar scent of vinyl and peppermint greets you like an old friend. The engine starts on the first turn, a confident, low-frequency rumble, and you pull away from the station, the gravel popping beneath the tires one last time before you find the smooth, silent embrace of the asphalt. The sun is lower now, a bruised orange orb that has begun to sink toward the jagged line of the distant tree line, casting shadows so long they look like dark water flowing across the road. The rhythm of the drive returns, the Buick's suspension for the gentle rises and falls of the county road, a slow, pendulum motion that makes your eyelids feel heavy and warm. You are moving through a world made of light and texture, where the only thing that matters is the steady hum of the tires, the glow of the amber radio dial, and the knowledge that the road goes on, unhurried and infinite, into the cooling heart of the evening. The sky has begun its slow, spectacular bruised plum transformation, a deep transition from the honey gold of the afternoon to a soft electric violet that seems to vibrate at the very edges of your vision. As the Buick glides over a gentle rise in the road, the long horizontal expanse of the dashboard is suddenly bathed in a reflected glow, the first flickering signs of a roadside diner, its neon tubes buzzing with a low-frequency hum that you can almost feel in your teeth before you can actually hear it. You ease off the accelerator, and the heavy car responds with a graceful, momentum-driven coast, the transmission downshifting with a nearly imperceptible thump that resonates through the plush floor mats. The diner is a stainless steel capsule sitting alone in a sea of darkening gravel, its windows glowing with a warm, buttery light that spills out onto the pavement in long, rectangular patches. You pull the Buick into a space near the end of the lot, the tires crunching over a stray patch of dry weeds with a sharp, brittle sound that punctuates the evening's growing stillness. As you reach for the headlight switch, a solid pull-out knob of fluted plastic, there is a heavy, mechanical clack as you tug it toward you, and instantly, two long, pale yellow beams of light cut through the twilight. They illuminate the swirling dust and a few stray moths that dance in the sudden glare, their wings appearing like tiny, frantic sparks of silver against the deepening blue. You turn the ignition key back, and the V8 engine doesn't just stop. It exhales, a final soft hiss of air and a series of rapid metallic tinks as the manifold begins to contract in the cooling air. Stepping out of the car, the evening air is different now. The heavy, humid weight of the sun has lifted, replaced by a crisp, cooling breeze that carries the scent of damp earth and the distant, savory aroma of grilled onions and percolating coffee. The diner's door is a heavy, glass and aluminum affair with a long, vertical handle that feels cold and smooth against your palm. As you push it open, a small bell mounted to the frame lets out a singular, high-pitched cling, a sound that seems to hang in the air for a second before being swallowed by the interior atmosphere. The air inside is thick with the history of 1,000 Sunday drives, the smell of heavy cream, burnt sugar, and the faint metallic tang of the griddle. You slide into a booth upholstered in a deep, cracked oxblood vinyl, the material cold at first before it begins to sap the warmth from your legs, and you rest your arms on the Formica tabletop. The surface is patterned with tiny, interlocking boomerangs of grey and white, worn smooth in the center by decades of sliding plates and resting elbows. A waitress in a crisp, starch-heavy uniform approaches, her rubber-soled shoes making a soft, rhythmic squeak slap against the black and white tile floor, and she sets a heavy ceramic mug down before you with a solid, muffled thud. The coffee is dark and steaming, a swirling vortex of mahogany that reflects the overhead fluorescent lights in sharp, trembling lines. You wrap your hands around the mug, the heat seeping through the thick porcelain into your palms, a grounding, tactile warmth that makes the rest of the world feel very far away. Outside the window, the Buick sits under the glow of a single, buzzing street lamp, its harvest gold paint now looking like aged parchment, the chrome bumpers reflecting the flickering neon sign, "Open, open, open," in a rhythmic, pulsing red. You are the only soul in the booth, the only traveller in this moment, and the sound of the percolator bubbling behind the counter is a steady, liquid heartbeat that tells you there is no reason to rush, no reason to be anywhere but right here, in the soft, neon-lit centre of the night. The diner is a cathedral of chrome and steam, and as you sit in the oxblood booth, the world outside the plate glass window begins to dissolve into a dark, liquid navy. You reach for the heavy, silver-plated fork resting on a paper napkin. The napkin is thin, embossed with a faint Greek key border that feels like braille against your thumb, and the weight of the utensil is surprising, a solid, mid-century heft that speaks of durability and repetitive polish. As you lift it, the tines catch the overhead fluorescent light, sending a quick, jagged reflection dancing across the Formica tabletop. You press the fork into a thick slice of apple pie, the crust yielding with a dry, rhythmic crunch that sounds like walking on autumn leaves, followed by the soft, yielding resistance of the cinnamon-heavy fruit. The steam rises in a thin, translucent ribbon, smelling of nutmeg and wood smoke, a scent that stays trapped in the small, pressurized space of the booth. To your left, a wall-mounted Seeburg jukebox selector waits in a housing of polished chrome and cracked plastic. You reach out, your finger tracing the alphabetized buttons A through K, 1 through 10, feeling the slight oily residue of 1,000 other travelers who have sat in this exact spot. You drop a quarter into the slot, and the sound it makes is a long, musical journey through the machine's internal throat. A sharp clink, a series of rolling, metallic tumbles, and finally, a deep, resonant thud as the coin hits the cash box. There is a moment of profound mechanical silence, and then the internal motor hums to life, a low electric vibration that moves through the wall and into the back of your booth. You watch through the glass window of the selector as the mechanical arm moves with a jerky, purposeful dignity, scanning the vertical row of 45 RPM records like a librarian searching for a forgotten text. It finds its mark, the metal pincers closing around the black vinyl disc with a soft, rubberized snap, and as the record is lowered onto the spindle, you hear the needle drop. It's a sound of pure analog texture, a series of microscopic pops and a steady velvet hiss that precedes the first note. The song is a slow, pedal-steel lament, the kind of music that feels like it was written specifically for empty roads and harvest gold Buicks. The sound is filtered through the diner's built-in speakers, which are hidden behind wooden grills near the ceiling, giving the music a hollow, echoing quality that makes the lyrics seem to float just out of reach. As you finish the last of the pie, the waitress returns with the glass coffee pot, the brown liquid sloshing rhythmically against the sides as she moves. She pours a refill without asking, the sound a high-pitched splashing gurgle that transitions into a deep, resonant hum as the mug fills to the brim. The steam hits your face again, a moist, caffeinated cloud that clears the lingering cobwebs of the long afternoon drive. You reach for the glass sugar pourer, a heavy, ribbed cylinder with a fluted metal cap, and as you tilt it, the granulated sugar pours out in a steady, white stream, hitting the dark surface of the coffee with a soft, muffled hiss before vanishing into the depths. You stir it with a long, thin spoon, the metal striking the porcelain sides of the mug in a bright, rhythmic clink, clink, clink that keeps time with the ticking of the clock over the kitchen pass-through. The clock is a large, circular Westclox with a sweep second hand that moves in a smooth, silent glide rather than a series of staccato jumps. You watch it for a full minute, grounded by its unwavering commitment to the passage of time. Outside, the wind has picked up, and a stray piece of newspaper tumbles across the gravel lot, its dry pages scratching against the Buick's tires, with a sound like a distant rhythmic brush on a snare drum. The world out there is getting colder, turning into a landscape of shadows and sharp edges, but inside the diner, the air remains warm, still, and scented with the comforting fatigue of a day well spent. You pay the bill, the cash register letting out a loud, triumphant ding as the drawer springs open, and you step back out into the night. The transition is a shock to the senses. The air is now sharp and smelling of pine needles and cold stone. You walk toward the Buick, the crunch of your footsteps on the gravel sounding lonely and deliberate in the vast rural silence. You reach for the door handle, the chrome now freezing to the touch, and as you pull it, the heavy door swings open with that familiar, well-oiled groan. You slide back onto the vinyl seat, which has retained a ghost of the afternoon's heat, and the cabin of the car envelops you once more. The interior light, a soft amber glow from the dome lamp, illuminates the vast, padded landscape of the interior. You reach out and turn the ignition, and the V8 wakes up with a deep, confident roar that seems to push back the encroaching darkness of the woods. You pull the headlight knob all the way out, and the two pale beams of light strike the side of the diner, illuminating the silver siding and the open sign one last time before you shift the car into reverse. The transmission engages with a soft, hydraulic sigh, and as you back away from the light, the diner shrinks in your rearview mirror, becoming a small, glowing jewel of civilization in an ocean of black fields. You are back on the road now. The Buick's tires humming a new, lower-frequency song on the cooling asphalt. The dashboard lights are a soft, dim green, reflecting off the glass of the speedometer and the AM radio dial. You reach over and adjust the fader knob, bringing the sound of the rear speakers up just a touch until the music seems to wrap around you like a heavy wool blanket. The road ahead is invisible beyond the reach of your high beams, a mystery that unfolds 100 feet at a time, and you settle into the rhythm of the night drive, the slow, hypnotic sway of the car, the steady pulse of the engine, and the infinite, starlit stretch of the 1974 countryside. The road begins to narrow as it winds down toward the river valley, the tall cornfields giving way to ancient, overhanging oaks that create a tunnel of interlocking branches above the Buick's roof. In the moonlight, the leaves look like hammered silver, flickering in and out of existence as the car's headlights sweep across them. You can feel the change in the air. It's heavier here, damp and smelling of moss, wet stone, and the slow, decaying sweetness of the riverbank. You approach a one-lane iron bridge, its skeletal structure rising out of the darkness like the rib cage of a prehistoric beast, and as the Buick's tires transition from the asphalt to the wooden planks of the bridge deck, the sound of the drive changes instantly. It becomes a rhythmic, percussive thump-thump, thump-thump, a hollow wooden resonance that vibrates through the frame of the car and up into your seat. Between the planks, you catch glimpses of the black water swirling far below, reflecting the stars in broken, shivering fragments. The iron trusses of the bridge pass by your window in a blur of grey-painted metal, each one letting out a low, metallic whoosh of displaced air as you glide past. You slow down, savouring the strange, acoustic intimacy of the bridge, the way it traps the sound of the Buick's engine and bounces it back at you in a complex mechanical echo. Once across, the road levels out into a low-lying meadow where a thick, ground-level fog has begun to pool. It's a tulle fog, a white, opaque blanket that sits just 2 feet off the ground, obscuring the road surface but leaving the tops of the fence posts visible like the masts of sunken ships. You reach for the light switch and twist it, dimming the instrument panel until the green glow of the dash is just a ghostly suggestion, allowing your eyes to adjust to the pale, ethereal light of the fog. The Buick feels like it's no longer driving on a road, but floating on a cloud, the suspension soaking up the invisible terrain while the long harvest gold hood pierces through the white mist. The sound of the world has been muffled by the fog, reduced to a singular, cottony silence. Even the engine seems to grow quieter, its roar softened by the moisture in the air. You reach out and turn the wiper switch, a heavy, sliding lever that moves with a slow, mechanical resistance, and the wipers sweep across the windshield with a rhythmic, rubbery squish-thud, squish-thud. They clear away a fine sheen of mist, leaving the glass crystal clear for a few seconds before the fog begins to reclaim it. The rhythm of the wipers becomes the new heartbeat of the journey, a steady, metronomic pulse that clears your vision and focuses your mind on the immediate few yards of road ahead. You pass an old farmhouse, its windows dark and sightless, the only sign of life a single porch light that looks like a dying star in the mist. The smell of wood smoke returns, sharper now, mixed with the scent of wet grass and the metallic tang of the bridge you just left behind. You are deep in the heart of the night now, moving through a landscape that feels outside of time, a place where the 1973 Buick LeSabre isn't just a car, but a time-traveling vessel, carrying you safely through the fog toward a destination that doesn't matter nearly as much as the sensation of the movement itself. The road begins to climb again, rising out of the river valley and back into the open air of the ridge. As you break through the top of the fog bank, the stars suddenly reappear, brighter and closer than before, and the air turns dry and crisp once again. You reach over and turn the radio dial, finding a station that is playing nothing but the sound of a distant thunderstorm, a recording used by the late-night DJ to bridge the gap between songs. The low, rolling thunder coming through the Buick speakers sounds like the earth itself breathing, a deep sub-bass rumble that vibrates in the steering wheel and settles in your chest. You lean back, the vinyl seats sighing as you adjust your weight, and you let the Buick lead the way into the final darkest hours of the night. The Buick reaches the crest of the ridge, and for a moment the world feels impossibly vast and silent, the V8 engine dropping to a whispered, effortless hum as the terrain levels out. Far off on the horizon, a new kind of light begins to bleed into the indigo sky, not the soft, organic glow of a farmhouse porch lamp, but a harsh, towering halo of sodium vapor orange that marks the intersection of the county road and the interstate. It is a colonial outpost of the modern world, a 24-hour truck stop that hums with a frequency entirely different from the sleepy, cricket-laden fields you've just traversed. As you approach, the asphalt beneath the tires begins to change. The smooth tar and chip surface of the back roads gives way to heavy, reinforced concrete, and the sound of the drive shifts from a continuous velvet hiss to a rhythmic, structural thrum-clack, as the massive white-wall tires meet the expansion joints of the highway overpass. You feel the vibration first in the soles of your feet, a subtle telegraphic tapping that moves through the Buick's thick floor carpeting, a deep pile nylon that smells faintly of shampoo and old dust, and travels up into your calves. You reach out to the steering wheel, your fingers finding the familiar grooves of the resin rim, and you notice the way the orange light from the distant towers begins to play across the chrome horn ring. The light is sickly and thick, turning the harvest gold of the hood into a strange, metallic bronze. And as you draw closer, the individual details of the truck stop begin to resolve themselves through the bug-spattered windshield. You see the towering sign, a massive plastic monolith held aloft by steel girders that groan almost imperceptibly in the night wind, its neon borders flickering with a rapid, insect-like jitter. The air entering the cabin through the vents has changed again. The sweet, damp rot of the river valley has been scrubbed away, replaced by the heavy, industrial perfume of the interstate, a mixture of burnt diesel, hot rubber, and the metallic tang of cooling brake drums. You move your foot from the accelerator to the brake pedal, and the sensation is one of immense hydraulic power. The pedal is wide and covered in a cross-hatched rubber pad that feels solid under your shoe, and as you apply pressure, you can feel the weight of the 2-ton sedan shifting forward, the front coil springs compressing with a slow, dignified grace. The nose of the car dips, the chrome hood ornament pointing toward the glowing asphalt, and the sound of the engine drops an octave, the exhaust note becoming a wet, guttural burble as the transmission holds onto the gear. You turn into the entrance of the truck stop, and suddenly you are surrounded by the giants of the road. To your left and right, rows of Peterbilts and Kenworths sit idling, their massive chrome exhaust stacks venting thin, shimmering plumes of heat into the cool night air. The sound is overwhelming, a subterranean, multi-tonal roar of a dozen different diesel engines all breathing in unison, creating a physical pressure that you can feel in your chest. It's a rhythmic, mechanical growl, punctuated by the occasional shh of an air brake release, a sound so sharp and sudden it echoes off the side of the Buick like a gunshot. You navigate the Le Sable through this forest of polished metal and mud flaps, the car feeling small and elegant in comparison, a sliver of 1970s luxury weaving through the machinery of commerce. You find a spot away from the main throb of the idling trucks, near a row of tall, humming vending machines that cast a pale blue light over the oil-stained concrete. As you bring the car to a final halt, the silence that follows the engine's shutdown is startling. You sit there for a long minute, your hands still resting on the wheel, watching the way the orange light of the towers catches the dust on the dashboard. The radio is still playing, a late-night talk show host's voice sounding thin and conspiratorial in the vastness of the cabin, the signal occasionally wavering as a massive rig pulls past the station's line of sight. You reach for the chrome door handle, and the metal is cold now, a sharp contrast to the warmth of the interior. And as you pull it, the latch releases with a heavy, satisfying clunk that sounds like a bank vault opening. Stepping out onto the concrete, the scale of the place hits you. The ground is hard and unforgiving, a grey expanse marked with the history of a million journeys, dark patches of dried oil, the geometric patterns of tire treads, and the occasional discarded pull tab from a soda can, glinting like a fallen star in the sodium glare. You walk toward the main building, and the wind whips around the corners of the massive trailers, carrying the sound of the interstate, a constant, high-speed whoosh of cars moving at 70 miles per hour, a sound that never stops, a river of light and sound that defines the modern night. The entrance to the truck stop shop is a set of heavy double-glass doors that hum with the vibration of the nearby compressors. As you push through them, the sound of the outside world is instantly cut off, replaced by the frantic electronic chirping of a row of pinball machines and the steady, low-frequency buzz of the refrigerated display cases. The air here is dry and smells of floor cleaner, hot dogs on a rolling grill, and the sharp, acidic scent of a coffee urn that has been brewing since yesterday. You walk past a rack of road maps, folded paper treasures with titles like Rand McNally State Highway Map, Indiana, and you can smell the ink and the wood pulp, a dry, nostalgic aroma that reminds you of every road trip you've ever taken. You wander toward the back, where a row of heavy, upholstered stools lines a horseshoe-shaped counter. The counter is topped with a thick slab of faux marble laminate, its edges trimmed in ribbed aluminum that reflects the overhead lights in a dizzying array of tiny, bright dots. You sit down, the stool spinning with a well-worn, ball-bearing smoothness, and you rest your boots on the chrome ring at the base. The texture of the floor here is different. It's a heavy-duty industrial tile, speckled with grey and black, designed to hide the wear of 1,000 work boots. You look at your reflection in the stainless steel of the coffee machine. Your face is distorted, a blurry, tired ghost of a person caught in the machinery of the night. The waitress here doesn't wear a uniform like the one at the diner. She wears a heavy flannel shirt with the sleeves rolled up, her movements quick and efficient, as she slides a thick white ceramic saucer onto the counter before you. She places a slice of chocolate cake on the saucer, the frosting dark and glossy, looking like the oil on the concrete outside. You pick up a heavy stainless steel fork. Its tines are slightly bent, a sign of its long service, and as you break off a piece of the cake, the sound is a soft, moist squish. The sweetness is intense, a concentrated burst of sugar and cocoa that makes your jaw ache for a second before the richness takes over. You eat slowly, savouring the solitude, the way the light from the overhead fluorescence makes the chocolate look almost black. Behind you, the door opens, and a driver walks in, the cold night air trailing behind him like a cape. He smells of diesel and cold wind, his heavy boots making a slow rhythmic clomp-clomp on the tile. He doesn't look at you. He simply takes a seat 3 stools down and orders a coffee, his voice a low, gravelly rumble that matches the idle of the trucks outside. The two of you sit there in a shared, silent understanding, 2 travellers paused in the middle of a vast moving machine, connected by the smell of the coffee and the orange glow of the towers outside. You finish your cake and stand up, the stool spinning once as you release it. You walk back through the double doors and out into the orange-lit night. The Buick is waiting for you, a golden anchor in the grey sea of the parking lot. As you walk toward it, you notice a thin layer of dew has begun to form on the chrome bumpers, the tiny droplets of water acting like 1,000 miniature lenses, each one reflecting the orange light of the towers. You reach for the key in your pocket, the metal cold and familiar in your hand, and you realize that the best part of the journey isn't the destination, but this, the feeling of the world moving around you, while you remain perfectly still in the heart of the machine. You slide back into the driver's seat, the vinyl giving way beneath you with a familiar, welcoming creak. You turn the key, and the V8 engine coughs once before settling into its powerful rhythmic idle. You shift into drive, and as you pull away from the truck stop, the orange light begins to fade in the rearview mirror, replaced by the deep, comforting black of the open highway. The interstate is calling now, a long, straight line of concrete that will carry you through the rest of the night and into the first, pale light of the morning. The Buick merges onto the interstate with a long, effortless sweep of the steering wheel, the front tires finding the seam where the ramp meets the main artery of the highway, and letting out a singular, resonant thud hump that vibrates through the steering column. Now the landscape has changed. The tight, claustrophobic curves of the country roads have been replaced by a vast 3-lane expanse of concrete that stretches toward the horizon in a perfectly straight line, carved through the dark heart of the Midwest. You settle into the center lane, the sweet spot where the road is smoothest, and you feel the Buick find its long-legged cruising stride at 65 miles per hour. At this speed, the car enters a state of mechanical grace. The wind noise around the thick A-pillars settles into a steady white noise rush, a sound like a distant waterfall that masks the low-frequency thrum of the engine until the two sounds merge into a singular, hypnotic drone. The dashboard is your only world now, a cockpit of soft-focus light and shadow. You reach out to the dimmer wheel and roll it all the way down, then back up just a fraction, until the horizontal speedometer glows with a faint, ghostly emerald hue that doesn't strain your eyes against the absolute blackness outside. The needle is rock steady, a thin orange sliver pointing toward the center of the dial, and beneath it, the odometer digits are frozen, halfway between 1 mile and the next, a silent testament to the thousands of miles this machine has already swallowed. You rest your right hand on the wide padded armrest that divides the front bench seat, feeling the subtle give of the foam beneath the vinyl. It's a texture like sun-warmed skin, and you let your left hand drape over the bottom of the steering wheel, the weight of your arm providing just enough tension to keep the car tracked straight. Outside the side windows, the world is a series of rhythmic, passing textures. Every few seconds, a green highway sign looms out of the darkness, caught in the reach of your high beams. The reflective surface of the sign flares with a sudden, brilliant intensity, the white letters spelling out names of towns you've never visited and may never see, before they are sucked back into the void as you pass. Then come the reflectors, tiny amber orbs mounted on flexible plastic stakes along the shoulder. As the Buick glides past them, they flash in a steady, metronomic sequence. Blink, 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 a visual heartbeat that measures the distance between here and nowhere. You find yourself syncing your breathing to their rhythm, your lungs expanding and contracting in time with the passing lights until you feel as though you are no longer a passenger in the car, but a part of its very architecture. The radio is now a chaotic theatre of the night, the AM signals bouncing off the ionosphere to bring you voices from 1,000 miles away. You turn the tuning knob slowly, feeling the mechanical friction of the internal dial cord, and you catch a fragment of a baseball game being played under lights in a city far to the south, the crack of the bat sounding muffled and nostalgic, followed by the roar of a crowd that sounds like static. Then, a few degrees further, you find a station playing a sequence of jazz records from the 50s. The sound of a stand-up bass, thick and woody, resonates through the Buick's rear parcel shelf speakers, vibrating the glass of the rear window. The music is thin and metallic, stripped of its depth by the distance it has travelled through the night air, yet it feels more real than anything you've ever heard on a modern stereo. It carries the weight of the miles, the texture of the atmosphere, and the lonely, late-night soul of the 1970s. A massive tractor-trailer begins to overtake you in the left lane, its presence announced by a growing subterranean vibration that you feel in your solar plexus before you see the lights. First, a pair of amber clearance lights appear in your side mirror, looking like the eyes of a deep-sea creature, and then the massive, chrome-plated grille of the truck pulls alongside your rear fender. The sound is a physical wall of noise, a high-pitched turbocharger whine over the deep, percussive roar of 16 tires hammering the concrete. The Buick sways slightly in the truck's wake, a gentle, oceanic roll as the displaced air pushes against the broad side of the sedan. You don't fight it. You simply lean into the movement, feeling the car's weight and its heavy-duty suspension absorb the turbulence. For a few seconds you are traveling in a tandem of steel and light, two ghosts moving through the 3 a.m. stillness, and then the truck pulls ahead, its red taillights receding into the distance like twin embers, leaving you alone once more in the quiet wake of the interstate. You reach for the ashtray, pulling it out from the center of the dash with a soft, metallic scritch of metal on metal. Inside, there is a small dedicated light that illuminates the polished chrome bowl, and you notice a few stray grains of tobacco from a previous journey, looking like ancient artifacts in the pale glow. You don't have a cigarette, but you find comfort in the mechanical action of the tray, the way it slides on its tracks, the solid thunk as it reaches its stop. It is a detail from a world where things were built to be manipulated by human hands, where every surface had a weight and every movement had a consequence. You slide it back in, the sound of the closure punctuating the steady drone of the tires. The concrete beneath you changes texture again, shifting from the smooth, cast sections to a rougher, aggregate-heavy surface that has been grooved for traction. The sound of the drive changes from a thrum to a high-pitched, singing hum, a musical note that rises in pitch as you maintain your speed. It's a strange, lonely sound, a vibration that seems to come from the very earth itself, as if the road is trying to tell you a story in a language you almost understand. You adjust your position on the seat, the vinyl making a soft, rhythmic creak-squish sound as the springs beneath you compress and release. Your legs feel heavy, a pleasant, leaden fatigue that starts in your hips and radiates down to your ankles, but your mind is preternaturally clear, sharpened by the sensory isolation of the cabin. Up ahead, you see the first signs of the blue hour. Not a light, but a softening of the absolute blackness at the very edge of the horizon. It is a deep, indigo bruise that suggests the world still exists beyond the reach of your headlights. You reach for the climate control lever, sliding it just a fraction toward the heat setting to combat the pre-dawn chill that has begun to seep through the floorboards. You hear the internal flap inside the dashboard move with a soft clack whir, and a moment later, the air from the floor vents turns from neutral to a dry, toasty warmth that smells faintly of the heater core and old wool. It hits your feet and rises, a slow, comforting convection that wraps around your legs and makes the vast, dark expanse of the interstate feel a little less cold. You are now the only car visible in any direction. The road belongs entirely to you, a grey ribbon of possibility that could take you to the edge of the continent if you simply kept your foot steady on the pedal. The Buick seems to sense this, its engine running with a buttery, frictionless perfection that makes you believe it could go on forever. You watch the orange needle of the speedometer, watching it vibrate just a hair's breadth in the green light, and you realize that this is the heart of the experience. The suspension of time, the perfect marriage of man and machine, and the long, slow cruise through the most unremarkable and yet most beautiful hour of the night. The transition begins with the turn signal, a long, slender chrome stalk on the left of the steering column that you move with a deliberate downward click. Inside the cabin, the sound is a rhythmic, mechanical tick-tock, tick-tock, the internal flasher relay firing with a metallic, hollow resonance that echoes within the hollow of the dashboard. On the dash, a small, triangular green arrow flashes in perfect synchronicity, a tiny beacon of intention in the vast indigo dark. You guide the Buick onto the off-ramp, a long, sweeping curve that forces the car's weight to shift to the right, the heavy coil springs leaning into the turn with a slow, predictable roll that makes the vinyl of the bench seats stretch and groan beneath you. As the speed drops from 60 to 40, then to 30, the interstate's high-speed hiss evaporates, replaced by the intimate, low-frequency sounds of the Buick's secondary systems, the subtle whine of the power steering pump as you navigate the curve, and the soft, hydraulic whir of the transmission downshifting into second gear. The concrete highway is gone, replaced by a narrow, two-lane ribbon of aged blacktop that follows the jagged contours of the shoreline. This road is different. It is older, more organic, its surface weathered by decades of salt spray and frost until it has the texture of dried parchment. As the tires roll over the first stretch of this coastal asphalt, the sound is a deep, textured growl, a granular vibration that communicates every crack and pebble directly into the rim of the steering wheel. To your left, the world is an abyss of deep, navy shadow, but you can sense the water's presence. A rhythmic, percussive slap hiss of small waves hitting the rocky bank, a sound that carries through the cracked-open vent window like a whispered secret. The air has changed completely. It is no longer the dry, industrial breath of the interstate, but a cold, heavy mist that smells of wet slate, decaying reeds, and the sharp, bracing mineral tang of deep, still water. You reach out and adjust the wipers to their intermittent setting, the slider moving with a series of tactile, notched resistances. The blades move across the glass with a slow, soulful dignity. Swish thump, clearing a fine veil of moisture that has begun to settle on the windshield. The moisture is so fine it's almost invisible, but it catches the dim blue light of the pre-dawn sky, turning the glass into a shimmering, translucent screen. Through it, the world is a study in monochrome. The blue hour has arrived in earnest, that surreal window of time where the sun is still well below the horizon, but its light has begun to scatter through the atmosphere, painting everything in shades of sapphire, cobalt, and slate. There are no shadows yet, only varying densities of blue, making the Buick's harvest gold hood look like a slab of cold, pale silver reaching out into the mist. The road dips close to the water's edge, and a thick white fog begins to roll across the pavement in slow, ghostly fingers. It's a low-lying vapor hugging the ground, and as the Buick's tires cut through it, you see the fog swirl in the rearview mirror, caught in the aerodynamic wake of the car's massive rear fenders. You slow down even further, the needle on the speedometer dropping to a lazy 20 miles per hour, and you turn the radio dial one last time. The AM signal is weak here, the music fading in and out of a sea of soft, rhythmic static that sounds like the breath of the lake itself. You find a station playing a solo piano piece, the notes sparse and echoing, each one landing like a drop of water in a still pool. The sound is perfectly suited to the landscape, a fragile, beautiful melody that seems to be coming from the stars rather than a transmitter. You find a small gravel pull-off overlooking a line of ancient, weather-beaten pylons that march out into the water. As you bring the Buick to a halt, you don't turn off the engine immediately. You let it idle, the steady chug-chug-chug of the V8 acting as a grounding force against the ethereal silence of the morning. You lean your head back against the top of the seat, the vinyl cool against your neck, and you watch the light change. The indigo is slowly being infused with a pale, pearlescent grey at the very edge of the water, a thin line of light that marks the boundary between the night and the coming day. The silence here is absolute, broken only by the Buick's cooling metal, a series of sharp, rhythmic pings, and the distant, lonely cry of a loon somewhere out in the fog. You reach into the glove box, the door dropping down with a heavy, undamped clunk, and you pull out a folded paper map. The paper is soft and frayed at the edges, smelling of old ink and the cedar of the glove box lining. You don't need it to find your way. You know exactly where you are, but you find comfort in the tactile reality of it, the way the creases feel under your fingertips, the way the lines of the roads look like veins on a leaf. You are a part of this landscape now, a stationary point in a world that is just beginning to wake up. The Buick sits around you like a protective shell, a 4,500-pound sanctuary of glass and steel that has carried you through the dark and delivered you to the edge of the light. A soft, rhythmic sound begins to tap against the roof, the first few drops of a pre-dawn drizzle. They hit the metal with a hollow, metallic plink, a sound that is magnified by the car's vast, uninsulated ceiling. You watch as a single drop of water crawls down the side window, tracing a slow, jagged path through the dust of the journey, leaving a clean, dark trail in its wake. The world is becoming more defined. You can now see the individual stones on the shore, the dark green of the pines clinging to the rocks, and the way the fog is beginning to lift, revealing the vast, glass-like surface of the lake. The unremarkable beauty of the moment is overwhelming, a simple collection of cold air, grey light, and the steady, dependable presence of a 1973 Buick LeSabre. You reach for the ignition and finally turn the key to the left, cutting the engine. The silence that follows is not empty. It is full of the sounds of the morning, the rain on the roof, the water on the shore, and your own steady, quiet breathing. The drive isn't over, but the night is, and as you sit there in the soft blue stillness, you realize that the world is moving at exactly the right pace. The world is held in a breathless, fragile equilibrium, a moment where the deep sapphire of the night has surrendered to a pale, translucent lavender that seems to emanate from the water itself. You remain seated in the Buick, the silence of the cabin now so profound that you can hear the faint rhythmic ticking of the analog clock buried in the dash, a small mechanical heartbeat that has survived the decades, its second hand jerking forward in tiny, determined increments. Then it happens. A single, razor-thin fracture of brilliant molten copper appears at the very furthest seam of the horizon, where the grey-black water meets the sky. It is a silent explosion of light that instantly transforms the landscape, the first ray of the 1974 sun striking the chrome ornament atop the Buick's hood with a flash so bright it leaves a momentary ghost in your vision. As the sun climbs, a physical transformation begins to take place on the skin of the car. The fine, crystalline dew that had settled over the harvest gold paint and the vast horizontal stretch of the roof begins to react to the sudden warmth. You watch through the windshield as thin, wispy ribbons of white steam begin to curl upward from the hood, rising like miniature ghosts into the cool air. The smell reaches you through the vents, a damp, metallic scent of heated pond water and the faint, sweet aroma of the car's wax being awakened by the heat. The steam dances in the new light, turning the front of the Buick into a shimmering, ethereal altar, while the long shadows of the roadside pines begin to pull back, retreating like dark tide water across the gravel pull-off. You reach for the door handle, and the metal is no longer freezing. It carries a faint, burgeoning warmth that feels like an invitation. You step out of the car, and the sound of your boots hitting the wet gravel is a sharp, percussive crunch slap that echoes off the surface of the lake, sounding louder and more significant than it did under the cover of darkness. The air is bracingly cold, but the sun on your face carries a surprising weight, a golden pressure that begins to thaw the lingering fatigue from your bones. You walk to the edge of the water, the tall, damp grass brushing against your trousers with a soft, rhythmic swish hiss, and you watch the fog bank out on the lake begin to dissolve. It doesn't just disappear. It breaks apart into slow-moving islands of white vapor that catch the sunlight, turning the water into a field of glowing, liquid opal. The sensory details of the morning are microscopic and overwhelming. You notice the way a single bead of water hangs from a rusted barbed wire fence post, refracting the entire sunrise in a tiny, upside-down world of orange and blue. You hear the first bird of the morning, a red-winged blackbird, letting out a sharp, liquid trill from the reeds, a sound so clear and isolated that it feels like it was meant only for you. The world is waking up, but it is doing so with a slow, dignified restraint, a 1974 pace that refuses to be rushed by the coming day. You turn back to look at the Buick, and in this light, the car is magnificent, a long, low-slung monument to a specific kind of American optimism, its chrome bumpers reflecting the entire shoreline in a distorted, beautiful curve. You return to the driver's seat, and as you slide back in, the vinyl is no longer a cold shock. It has begun to absorb the ambient light, offering a soft, supple embrace. You reach for the ignition, and this time, the V8 doesn't just start. It awakens with a triumphant, resonant bark that sends a small flock of hidden ducks splashing into the air. You shift into drive, the transmission engaging with a smooth, oiled finality, and you begin the final trek along the shoreline toward the breakfast spot. The road here is even narrower, a winding path of grey stone and ancient asphalt that smells of pine needles and wood smoke. As you drive, the sunlight begins to play through the trees, creating a rhythmic, strobing effect across the dashboard. Gold, shadow, a visual pulse that keeps time with the low-frequency hum of the tires. You pass a small boathouse, its weathered cedar shingles silvered by years of salt and sun, and you catch the scent of outboard motor oil and old rope, a sharp, nostalgic olfactory note that anchors you in the moment. The road begins to turn inland, moving away from the water and toward a small cluster of buildings nestled in a grove of maple trees. You see the sign for the cafe, a hand-painted wooden board swinging from a creaking iron bracket, and you feel a sense of completion. The night is over, the journey is nearly at its end, and the world is exactly as it should be, quiet, sun-drenched, and unremarkable in the most comfortable way imaginable. The Buick slows to a dignified crawl as you turn into the narrow, unpaved lot of the Shoreline Cafe, the tires letting out a soft, rhythmic scrunch pop as they press over a fresh layer of white limestone gravel. You find a spot directly facing the east, where the sun is now high enough to cast long, golden ladders of light through the canopy of the maple trees, illuminating the interior of the car with a warm, dusty brilliance. You reach for the ignition and give the key one final counterclockwise turn. The V8 engine lets out a soft, subsiding sigh, the internal components coming to a halt with a series of distinct metallic tinks as the heat begins to dissipate from the block. The silence that rushes in is different from the silence of the night. It is a full, expectant quiet, filled with the distant, rhythmic drumming of a woodpecker and the soft, liquid gurgle of a nearby stream. You sit for a long moment, your hands resting on the top of the steering wheel, watching the way the sunlight catches the fine, swirling grain of the imitation wood on the dashboard. The interior of the Buick feels like a time capsule now, a pressurized chamber of 1974 nostalgia that has successfully shielded you from the passage of the hours. You reach for the door handle, feeling the solid, mechanical resistance of the latch, And as you step out, the morning air is a revelation, sharp, clean and smelling of damp pine, and the first faint aroma of wood smoke coming from the cafe's chimney. The walk to the entrance is short, but you take it slowly, savouring the way the gravel feels under your soles and the way the shadows of the leaves dance across the harvest gold paint of the Buick's trunk. The cafe door is a heavy, dark-stained oak with a large pane of rippled glass that distorts the interior into a collage of warm ambers and creams. As you push it open, a brass bell chiming overhead, you are enveloped in the ultimate sensory landing of the journey. The air is thick and comforting, a dense atmosphere of percolating coffee, sizzling butter, and the sweet, heavy scent of maple syrup being poured over hot griddles. You take a seat at the counter, a thick slab of polished pine that feels cool and smooth against your forearms. The waitress, moving with a slow, practiced grace, places a heavy off-white porcelain mug in front of you. It has a weight that feels ancient, a solid, thumb-thick handle that fits perfectly in your grip. The coffee is poured from a glass carafe, the liquid a deep, translucent mahogany that swirls with steam, and as you take that first sip, the warmth travels from your throat to your chest, grounding you in the here and now. You look out the window, back toward the parking lot where the Buick sits in the full glory of the morning sun. The chrome bumpers are gleaming, reflecting the blue of the sky and the green of the trees in a perfect panoramic curve, and the car looks entirely at peace, a mechanical traveller that has earned its rest. You watch a local farmer pull up in a weathered pickup truck, the sound of his engine a distant, friendly rumble that signals the start of the day's work for the rest of the world. Your breakfast arrives, thick slices of sourdough toast, golden and glistening with melted butter, and a small ceramic jug of syrup that is still warm to the touch. The sound of your fork against the plate is a soft, rhythmic clink, a domestic melody that brings the epic scale of the night drive down to a single, intimate moment of satisfaction. You eat slowly, watching the dust motes drift in the shafts of sunlight that pierce the cafe's windows, feeling the heavy, comfortable weight of the night's memories settling into your mind. There is no hurry to leave, no destination left to reach. The world has moved into the daylight at a 1974 pace, and you are perfectly in sync with its rhythm. As you finish your coffee, you feel a profound sense of unremarkable peace, the kind of comfort that comes from a long road, a steady engine, and the knowledge that the world is, for this moment, exactly as it should be. You lean back on the stool, the wood creaking softly beneath you, and you take one last look at the Buick sitting quietly in the sun, waiting for the next time the road calls your name.